So welcome everyone to this International Student Ambassador event, How to Become a PhD Student. My name is Joseph. I'm the moderator for this event. And what we do in the International Student Ambassadors is we work as a group of international students from 16 different countries and 4 different continents to promote the academics and programs of the University of Tartu. And we're so thankful today to have 4 panelists joining us to help us out and present you with some information about becoming a PhD student. Joining us is Joseph from the Institute of Education, Louis from the Social Sciences, Milda from the Humanities, and Arun from Biotechnology. So what we're hoping you can get out of this event is to gain some insights into what it's like to apply to the University of Tartu for a PhD. And then our panelists will give us some inside information about what their personal experiences were like applying, why they chose to study a PhD, what else they considered, and how their journey has been so far. Just as a reminder, the application period opens on the 1st of May, and we're hoping that you'll come join us at the University of Tartu. We'll also be covering a little bit of information regarding the new law regarding PhD study and its equivalence to work experience. During the presentation, we invite you to place any questions in the chat box. And for admissions related questions, you can contact PhD admissions at ut.ee. We won't be covering any admissions related questions, specifically regarding policies and procedures. And if you would like to address your question to a specific person, you can start your question with the name of the person, and then we'll know who to direct it to. So without further ado, our first speaker is Louis. He's a PhD student from the United States in the social sciences, and currently he's working on how the populist radical right parties of Estonia and Latvia utilize social media and party structure to engage with various political issues. So Louis, you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you. So 10 minutes, I will be as brief as possible. My PowerPoint is also going to be as brief as possible because I would prefer just to talk. But indeed, I'm a political scientist within the Faculty of Social Science, but I'm at the Johan Schitte Institute of Political Studies, and I am a PhD candidate, but also a junior research fellow in comparative politics. So actually that has a lot of bearing on how I view the new law for how PhD students will be status-wise. I'm coming from a privileged position, but I've had an extremely positive experience thus far, both at my institute and at the University of Tartu, and also in Estonia, I should say. I think that this new law will really help new students, both financially, but also in terms of being able to more fully integrate them into academic life, but also give PhD students a taste of what a career as a researcher is like. As Joseph noted, I am from the United States, but I did both my bachelor and my master's in Canada, and that played a special role on how I got here. In terms of my specific focus, my dissertation is an article-based dissertation, and it does focus on populist radical right parties in Estonia and Latvia. But more specifically, what I focus on is social media and how these parties use both party structure as well as social media to engage in issues of nationalism and ethnicity, and as well as what impact these parties have on existing or potential sociocultural cleavages. And my cases are EKRE in Estonia and National Latvianibu in Latvia. And I'm currently, as I said, doing an article-based dissertation, and I'm 3 out of 4 articles done. Most departments, including my own, mandate that you have to have 3 articles if you want to do an article rather than a monograph. but I've agreed with my supervisors to do, I have two supervisors, Velo Vetai and Andres Kasekamp, who's ironically now at the University of Toronto's Monk School for Global Affairs as the chair of Estonian Studies. He came where I left and I didn't know him at the time. Funny story. But I'm working on the last article, and then I have the summer to do the binding text. So if you are thinking about doing a PhD, at least in the social sciences, I can't speak for other faculties, you can do it article based, or you can write a traditional monograph. There's pros and cons. One way is not better than the other. The reason I chose to do an article base is because I felt that that would help me get my name out there in published space. However, my institute also mandates if you're doing a monograph, then you also have to have an article. So it's more of a personal choice, whatever you feel you can do better as a researcher, which I think that really is the way to address research in general, is find what works for you, know early on what your strengths are, play to your strengths, and then also find out what your weaknesses are and how you can either circumvent them or how you can get better at them. One of my personal weaknesses before, which I felt that like I overcome, and I overcame that during my experience as a PhD student, was public speaking. As a junior research fellow, I am also lecturing a lot. I teach courses on methodology in social sciences and methods, two distinct things, as well as lecturing on populism and democracy and democratic institutions. And I had no experience doing that prior. And I had a little bit of experience as a teaching assistant, but it's not the same thing. I also hadn't ever practiced public speaking in a conference. And so my first year here, I took a course that was literally entitled Conference Presentations for Graduate Students. And I remember what the teacher did is she filmed each and every one of us, and then she had us watch it in front of the class. And then she provided a polite and diplomatic but scathing critique of our public speaking skills. And that stuck with me because I really watched the video over and over again and thought about things about my ums and my likes and my pen clicking and my eye contact. And these minor things that you might not necessarily think about when you select a PhD program actually are quite useful in personal development, because it's not just about thesis writing. It's about presenting yourself. It's about learning how to get on grants, learning how to apply grants, learning how to work as a team, learning how to lecture, and also learning how to find a work-life balance or a thesis, other work, teaching, whatever those expectations are of you, finding that type of balance. I want to say that my professional career has really flourished when I got to the University of Tartu. My institute is really well connected with other institutes and other departments in political science in Europe, as well as in North America. And so I actually was lucky enough to meet the two top people in my specific subfield through connections that my department had. So for example, I met a professor in Viadrina and the University of Frankfurt an der Oder. I saw on one of the listservs that this university has a program for visiting researchers. And so I applied immediately because I knew this professor worked there. And it just so happened that he was in the middle of a very big research project and they didn't have anybody who worked on the Baltic states. And so actually he was very enthusiastic for me to come. And so my first ever journal publication, this project happened to have another top name who's one of the most cited. He's won several of the most prestigious awards in political science. He actually reviewed my first journal article, and you can trace that all the way back to my experience as a doctoral student at UT. I want to say a couple of words about how I ended up here as a PhD student, because one of the things that I think is really important when people are considering, should I do a PhD, should I not? A PhD is very rewarding, It's a very prestigious degree, but it entails a lot of work, and then it entails a lot of hard work, and it will consume your life. And you have all kinds of memes and funny support pages where academics go to have a laugh, or maybe when their spirits are down. But I would say if you're thinking of doing a PhD, do it if your heart's in it, because it is rewarding, especially at the end. I don't have my letters yet, so I can't comment on how it feels to get it, but I can only imagine how amazing of a feeling that is. I also think it says something about the personality of a person more than just the research that they can produce. I think it demonstrates professionalism, commitment, and a level of emotional, academic, and personal maturity. So I would encourage those of you who are thinking about doing it, if you have something that you're really passionate about researching, then absolutely engage in it. Quick story about how I found, because I think I have 2 minutes, I'm going to try to maintain military discipline here, is that I have a documented learning disability, and I always knew that I wanted to be an academic, but I wasn't quite ready when I finished high school for a couple of reasons. And so I decided to go to the military. I was in the United States Marine Corps for a couple of years, and then I moved to Canada, and I did my BA in history, and then I found a topic that I really liked, and I switched to political science. And I took a year off after my MA to look for the perfect PhD program for me. And at the time, only 2 people did what I was doing. One was in Riga and one was in Tartu, and that's my supervisor. And I got a experience of the research life because in that gap year, I was a visiting researcher at ULB in Brussels, where I was really able to craft my topic, to pick something narrow and to pick something specific. And when I found out that I had a supervisor who would supervise me, I wanted to look at what the university was like, what was the department like, because it's more, and for those of you who are thinking about doing a PhD, absolutely supervision is important, but really look at the department and look at the university. And on an ending and final note, I could say I'm very pleased, more than just pleased. Everything, literally everything has exceeded my expectation. I plan on staying at the University of Tartu when I finish my PhD as a lecturer, and I feel very much at home. At first I felt welcomed, and now I feel very much part of the team at Johann Schutte. And so thank you for the invitation for me to speak about how I see the PhD. Obviously, I have very strong but very well-informed opinions, and I would be happy to answer anyone's questions. And that's a wrap for me.
All right, thank you, Louis. Next up, we have Milda. She's from Lithuania and a third-year PhD student in the humanities. She's currently researching the Livonian Joseph and its functions to contribute to better understanding of language contexts in the Baltic Sea region. Interestingly enough, it's also the only summary of current research that I really didn't understand, so maybe she can provide a little insight on that. Go ahead, Milda.
Okay, so hello everybody, I'm Milda, and thank you, Louis, for talking about a lot of the things that I will not talk about, actually. So maybe this will be a good thing, so that we will provide a different point of view. So, but Louis did mention a lot of the memes out there. I decided to borrow some of them from the internet, and I can tell you that they're all true. Most of them are quite negative, and they're all true, but there is a huge but, and that's what I will talk about a little bit. So, and I would like to start with what I study. So I'm studying Estonian and Finno-Ugric linguistics. That's a program that I study at. And I focus on the Baltic Finnic languages, so Estonian, Finnish would be the most known ones, but I specifically concentrate on Livonian, and also it's basically contacts in the Baltic Sea region. And I study one small part of the Livonian language that is indirect command constructions called Jasiv, and for example, I can give you, let him close the window would be the kind of constructions that I study. It seems quite a small thing, right? But most of our research is actually a very, very small part of a very big picture. So that is something that I think that we all need to take into consideration, that even though a PhD seems, or a dissertation seems a very specific thing, but it can give you insights into much bigger processes. Like, for example, in my case, the thing that I study, this small little construction, can actually give insights on how, on the contacts of languages in this region. Also, not languages, but also cultures and peoples, and also how they think, how it changes. And so through this one little thing, we actually study how things evolve, basically. And so I'm studying at the Institute of the General in Estonian Linguistics. And now, why PhD? I wanted to show you these, that like, I have, you know, that I'm a PhD student, and I've only cried twice today. This is true, and also that everybody's looking for results, and it's really hard work. But I find it meaningful. That is the main thing. And also it's something that Louis mentioned, that it's very rewarding. It truly does give me a purpose in life, because I generally find other work, other kinds of jobs, I just don't find them meaningful enough for me to keep me motivated. And I just love analyzing things. I would analyze things just like this, walking on a street. It's basically an obsession or a compulsion or a hobby, but that's very useful in PhD. So yeah, if you have an obsession like this, that would be a good place to make it work for you. And also, one thing that PhD does provide you, and also Louis mentioned that a lot, that the love to improve yourself, because you really do have the technologies, methods, they change all the time. There's new discoveries all the time. And that is something that you need to be on top of constantly. And that is challenging, but that is also absolutely fascinating. I also love to have the possibility to go on Monday to a shop when everybody's working. So the free schedule is a very nice thing. You can also write thesis during your night, if that's the time that you prefer to work on. I love the conferences and other academic events. I love the sharing of knowledge. I love the interactions with among scholars. It's absolutely fascinating for me. And I love challenges as a default. It's something that keeps me moving. So if you like challenges, I really think that this is a very key thing to like if you go to PhD, because that is a huge challenge, and a constant challenge, and a group of challenges, really an army of challenges. And the colleagues are amazing at the University of Tartu, that's what I can say. But why Tartu? So the mundane reasons would be that it was convenient, because I completed my master's in Tartu, and I already was living there, so that kind of helped. And I already had a supervisor, because I knew her from the past, and I already had a second supervisor. But also there are other reasons. For example, Tartu, University of Tartu is the best university in the Baltic states. The scholarship got raised right before I got into PhD, so that was nice. Also, the specialists in the field were present in my university, because there's not many universities that you can find good scholarship in a specific area. Sometimes you're generally bound by, your choices are bound in where you can find the specialists. So University of Tartu, Helsinki, or Germany basically were my choices, and Tartu was the best choice for me. Also because I've always wanted to live in the Baltic states, but also I absolutely love the bureaucracy and attitude towards student in University of Tartu. That's something that not many people might mention maybe, but coming from a different university, I absolutely love the attitude towards the student, and that all the processes are simple and everybody's motivated to help you to achieve everything and to really to assist you in any way possible so that you would succeed and you would not fall back. And I really love how lecturers and students are communicating. The communication is great. The hierarchy is existent, but it's not as strict. So basically you can have an actual relationship with your professors and not necessarily, you know, be some kind of a worm in the ground they're walking on. It's a really, really nice relationship among lecturers and students. And also, University of Tartu actually does care about the student feedback that they're getting. You have to fill out the form, but they're actually reading them and taking things into consideration. And that is not all over the place. So what am I doing now? These are also the issues that you can see on the meme. And it is true that ask any PhD student past the first semester, they will all tell you the same. And so I've not regretted this decision for a single moment. I absolutely love being in PhD. And almost every day, well, there are some days worse than others, but almost every day I'm absolutely excited to start doing the things that I do. And the problems that I need to solve are actually exciting, interesting, and I do want to solve them out of my interest and not just because somebody told me to do so. And it truly is hard work, but I absolutely love it. And the relationships with other PhD students are really becoming more and more important to me. It is the way to connect to other people that you cannot find that easily elsewhere, because every PhD student goes through the same thing. So it's really also rewarding to talk to these people. And I think that this is definitely the best job I've ever had compared to others. And I love the necessity to be honest. I have this in me, encoded in me, so I'm happy to use it, because in many places you cannot be completely honest, and this is the place that you have to, and it is very important for me. And why not to study? And I think it's very important to consider these things. For example, if you do not like to do analysis, that is a no-no. If that's not something that you enjoy, I find it very difficult to imagine how you would do it. Or for example, if you don't think you can or don't even want to admit that you were wrong, that is also a big issue. Like, you need to be able to understand that maybe even you will find out tomorrow that you were wrong yesterday, and that happens constantly. So it is a very important thing to do. For example, if you do not dare to challenge authority, for example, your professor, your supervisor might have written something you disagree with because your research shows something different, and you need to have the guts to put it forward and to be able to stand by your point, or to admit that you were wrong. Both of these things are very important. For example, if you do not like to read academic literature constantly, because you really do, that would be an issue. Also, if you do want to find out that you will never, ever know everything about anything, that is something that PhD does very well as well. You think that you will pick this very small thing and you will study the heck out of it. Not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. The things, your results will be important, and they will shed a light on something, but you will never ever know everything about anything. And this is a constant discovery and constant road to the unknown. And you have to be ready for this. And if this scares you, you might be doubtful about this, but if you're ready for this journey, because it's totally worth it, then it's a great thing to do. And if you do not want to pursue an academic career, then I personally do not really see a point in having a PhD and going through all this struggle, because I personally think that a PhD is basically the road to academia. at least in my personal opinion. And now, all of this sacrifice, and you find out that you're just alone and you've lost everybody, and you've spent your time with books and computer. So what's next after you've lost everything in your life? Well, I personally would love to continue my work in the Livonian Institute, which I am at right now, actually. And I would most certainly try to do a postdoc project, which is the road that most PhD students take to try to assert themselves in academia and to get some funding and to get an actual place to work. And I definitely see myself in academia, and I love it. I wouldn't want it any other way. And I would like to, all things considered, these are also references that I'm sure you will understand. But anyways, I would say that if you want it, go for it. If you feel that you can have the dedication, if you can really get yourself together, this is a very good way to do that. But be ready, it will not be a walk in the park, that's for sure. But thank you, and best of luck for you in your pursuits.
Yeah, thank you, Milda. Next up, we have Arun from India. He's a first-year PhD student in biotechnology, and he's currently planning to investigate how microbes in the soil and plants in the subarctic and boreal forests have changed as the result of climate change and land usage. So go ahead, Arun.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Is it visible? Okay. Okay, thanks, Joy, for your wonderful introduction. So, let me go. So, okay, just a second. Can you see my PowerPoint? Like, I couldn't see. Okay. 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 So myself, Arun, and I'm doing my doctoral degree in molecular and cell biology under the Faculty of Science and Technology. Okay. Actually, this event reminds me of my last year application process, since I was also rushing to apply this PhD program under various universities. I was also a bit afraid due to this COVID situation. I don't know how this application and this traveling process is going to be. Yeah, if I was aware during at that time about this event, then I would have been a bit chill at least. Okay, so I guess you can find many things like this online about how to get motivated for your PhD program. But I don't want to do the same like that. So I just want to share my experience and thoughts. So let's see. So my main personal motivation, what made me to apply for this PhD program was, I'm actually got addicted to the essence of research while I was doing my master's thesis, and I started to enjoy those outcomes. That's how my interest towards the PhD started. So at the end of my master's degree, I'm able to identify something useful to the society or something to the environment. So I have identified a potential biofertilizer, and through that research, I also published two research articles. So I thought that I just don't want to stop with this. So I need to fuel my ambitions, and I need to fuel my research experience. So the main fact that drive me to pursue this PhD was exploring the untapped microbial resource, which is like I don't know what the microbial resource it would be. So that I was very much curious to identify those things. So that really made me to choose the PhD program. So at this point, everyone will have this in your mind, I guess. So why I should go for a PhD program? If you are really interested in doing something, or if you want to get expertise in a particular area, then I would strongly suggest you to go for a PhD. So in my case, as I said before, I want to just explore the microorganisms world. So they really amazed me at every moment. So that's the main curious factor made me to pursue this PhD. So the next thing is, once you started to learn those specific area, you need to get expertise, right? So from my experience, I gained a lot of theoretical knowledge, but very little hands-on experience in case of research. I believe that this I could get during my PhD program. So after completing this PhD program, so everyone will have certain ideas in their mind regarding the opportunities, but you don't need to worry much about your opportunities because yeah, because you can get into many directions. If you want to just stay in the academic area, yeah, you are very well to stay in the academic. But if you want to get into the industrial sector, yeah, you can also get into there if you're a science student. From my friends' experience, what I learned was after completing this PhD, the growth in your career is quite frequent when compared to the candidates who have just completed a bachelor's or this master's degree. And the third point and the fourth point is kind of bonus. Um, you may also end up in finding something patentable, or at least something useful to the science society, or just the environment, whatever. But your PhD thesis would be something useful. That would I would say for sure. So I would like to state some one tragedy during my master's degree. I have identified the potential biofertilizer that could be applied in the agricultural field. But due to the time limitations and the financial constraints, I couldn't take it towards the commercialization. But it won't be the same during your PhD, I'm sure, because you will be spending at least 4 to 5 years in this program. And especially in the University of Tartu, they have very well established incubation center. If something you have identified and you want to take it to like application oriented one, yeah, the University of Tartu will really help you to do that. So yeah, how I come to know about this university. So this is the question that I frequently getting from my country. So uh, um, so my aim is to just pursue PhD in a European country, but not in the common destinations like Germany, Netherlands. So I started focusing on top 1 and 2 universities in the Baltic countries. So I started exploring the universities in Sweden, Finland, Estonia, and Denmark. But you may ask why you have chosen Estonia. Because the project that I'm currently working is 99% sync with my previous project, like my master's degree. So I came to know about my project in a website, in a journal website called FEMS. So this is how I just got to know about this. So if you are really interested to know more about the university PhD projects or annual conferences, events, their recent inventions, I would recommend you to just follow the pages in Twitter, LinkedIn, or some other journals where they have contacts. So far my PhD journey in Tartu. The first semester I have completed 36 ECTS. The minimum ECTS that you should complete in your first year is 30 ECTS, and you can also take more than that. So regarding the coursework, I felt that it's not too much workload. I'm able to balance between my reading as well as working environment. Yeah. Regarding my research work, to be frank, I'm a bit running behind my schedule. Due to this COVID situation, I'm unable to get most of the chemicals and equipments related to my studies. But I'm sure that I could cope up in my future. And yeah, my supervisor is really helping me to get all those stuffs as soon as possible. Yeah. So this is and I had a group out day out with my group, and we went to Otapa, which is called as winter capital of Estonia. And yeah, I believe that most of the groups in the Tartu University will take their lab mates to the different sites to know more each other. So don't worry about the people here. So they are really enjoying one. So yeah, so I just want to give a brief introduction about my curriculum. So I belong to the Institute of Molecular Biology, which comes under the Faculty of Science and Technology. So yeah, the curriculum is the molecular and cell biology. If you are expertise in any of the field here, yeah, and you can apply for this curriculum. So I did my master's in microbiology, so I'm able to apply to this curriculum. Right now, our institute has announced 4 PhD positions in the website. You can just visit the website, and if you're really interested, you can just go and apply in this site called as estonia.dreamapply.com. Yeah. Yeah, my final conclusion is that before applying the PhD program, find your curiosity. What made you to apply to this program? And please think that, do you really want this PhD program? And if you want that, how you would take it to further? That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun. And last but certainly not least, before the Q&A, is Joseph from Jamaica. He's a third-year PhD student in the Institute of Education, and he's currently working with some interesting things with 3D modeling and animation to help us better understand how it can be used from a teaching and learning perspective.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so my presentation will primarily be based on PowerPoint, and it's actually building on the 3 previous presenters' presentation, showing different aspects of PhD programs here at the University of Tartu. So I'm based at the Institute of Education, and my PhD falls in the category of educational science. My name is Joseph Grannum, third-year PhD student. I'm also DORA Plus sponsored. Later in my presentation, you'll understand what that means. So the first thing we need to ask ourselves is, how do you get here? You would have heard from the other presenters how it is for their respective programs, whether it's humanities, political science, or the science and technology. For education, we have various research centers, general education, primary education, educational technology, which is the one I belong to, as well as science education from the Faculty of Science and Technology. To get in, you have to have a project. Your PhD is considered a project. So we have several that are Estonian funded. There are others that are EU funded. And in my case, it's individual funded. Specifically for me, it's DORA Plus. So what are the steps? First, for us, you have to contact a prospective supervisor, do some preliminary work, preferably start drafting an article, maybe your literature review, etc., or do an article based on the time that's available between you demonstrating your interest and actually applying. Then you submit your proposal for the respective topic when it's advertised, and this has to be in agreement with your prospective supervisor. Both of you have to work on a plan. No, it's not recommended that you just randomly go to the website, select a topic and apply, and then seek a supervisor after. You might get through the application process, but the panel might not actually select you, as they would have had candidates who would have made contact before. So they shortlist based on those who have demonstrated interest in contacting prospective supervisors. It's a 4-year program, so it's research mixed with compulsory courses, elective courses, and specialty electives. Language of instruction is English. Some of the courses in the institutes are in Estonian, so for those of us who are foreigners and primarily use English, we have to wait until it's available. So it's a joint PhD program. You're looking at science education and education in the wider scope. Those who are science education are actually based in the Faculty of Science and Technology, and those of us who are within the different aspects or domains of education, which falls under the leadership of the Faculty of Social Sciences. So what's my journey to actually be exploring digital 3D and spatial thinking? First, for me, it's important to note that my PhD is self-actualization. I'm both a medical doctor and a specialist. I teach anatomy in the classical sense. And so my real world problem was, how do I improve teaching anatomy based on issues of less donor bodies, problems, curriculum change and becomes more modern. And so I've decided to embark on a journey to learn how to use technology in my teaching. Initially, I discussed it with several supervisors, not one, trying to find out how does it fit in the Institute of Education. And then I was told that based on the uniqueness of my topic, it would be better to have it sponsored. So what happened was the proposal was then sent through the PhD committee. It was approved with DORA Plus sponsoring in terms of the funding, and then it was advertised. At which time the final supervisor would agree to work with me. We'd worked out our plan. I applied through Dream Apply and the usual stuff of your interview selection, visa application, and so on. And I then came to Estonia. In case of how I got in touch or how I knew of Estonia, I studied in the USSR, just at the time when everything fell apart with the Baltics becoming free. So I started learning Russian language in the USSR, but I graduated in independent Ukraine. And so I knew of Estonia then. Also in the preliminary work up to my research project, I had come in contact with the head of the Center for Educational Technology. So we have done some works, including an Erasmus Plus project with my home university in Jamaica. So what am I obliged to do based on my contract as a UT PhD student and DORA Plus? I'm expected to have 70% of the ECTS taken, and in terms of research output, I'm required to produce evidence of that. And this in our institute is based on an article. Now, it doesn't matter what stage you are, whether it's just drafting, you had submitted, it's accepted or published, that must be presented at the end of every academic year during the review period. However, if you want, you're permitted to have at least 2 articles presented at a conference, but these conferences must have the proceedings published so that you can get the credits for the respective research work. In terms of the stipend that we get, in my case, it's linked to both the ECTS and performance. So if the performance falls off, part of the stipend can be removed by the attestation committee. So it's important for us at the end of every year to make sure that we do not only have courses that covers the ECTS, but we have some amount of research output documented. So what about the final work? As Louis had shared earlier, we have two choices, monograph or article-based. I selected article-based. And in our institute, article-based requires minimum 3 articles by the time you're ready to ask for permission to start writing your dissertation. If you choose the route of monograph, which I've heard a few Estonian students have expressed that that's the route, you need to publish at least 1 article. However, from what I am told, it's much harder to defend your work. It has to be more comprehensive. While if you do article-based, that means you would have been accepted by your peers, and so your work would be seen as being validated along the 4-year journey. So the PhD Review Committee, also called Attestation Committee, has a final say in our institute as to when you begin actually writing your dissertation. So how has it been for me? It has been quite enriching. A different approach than the Anglo-American system, which I'm used to in terms of the PhD. Here we have a doctoral consortium with 3 universities, University of Tartu, University of Helsinki, and University of Tallinn. Through them, you have free workshops, writing camps where we're taught or encouraged how to write, or we can do courses available within the consortium or also at other universities within Estonia. In terms of funding for conferences or home visit to collect data, mobility, summer schools, we have internal funding based on projects. If you are associated with a specific project, you can apply to Dora Plus or Erasmus Plus or Christianiac. So there are various funding routes that we can use. It's important, therefore, as stated by all before me, that you start thinking first and foremost why you want to do a PhD. It's important from day one to start networking with your peers, because these will be the next professors of the future. And so you also need to network with visiting professors looking for openings for postdocs, as well as future work. And of course, maximize the use of mobility. I know for some of you who are thinking of the PhD, you will be with families. So it will be kind of hard, but if you're kind of single or if you have your family well-structured, you can take an opportunity anywhere between 1 to 10 months outside of Estonia, getting experience from other institutions and working with other colleagues within your research field. So that is my journey and a brief introduction as to what it's like here in the Institute of Education. And this is a perspective for me, as I said before, coming from the point of view that I've already worked in academia and it's more like a career change. So I thank you, Aita, as we say in Estonian, and just for you to note that the University of Tartu welcomes budding minds in research. And if you are not successful 1 year, you can keep in touch and reapply. For my case, it took 4 years to convince the team here that they should accept someone coming from the medical sciences to work with them and work with them in developing tools to teach anatomy. So I'm just telling some of you that if you apply and you don't get through, don't give up. Keep in touch with your professors or the team on the ground. And once you are in touch, they will let you know what routes are possible for you to get the job done. That is if you're not in a specific research program or project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph. And so now we'll move on to the question and answer portion. As a reminder, we're not giving out any information on admissions procedure related questions. You can direct those to phadmissions@ut.ee. So our first question, I believe you can get a stipend as a PhD candidate, but I was wondering about other funding options. Can you get additional funding from positions?
So would you like me to share from my institute's perspective?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so you have the stipend, but you can also become a research assistant with a specific project which gives an additional income in most cases that I am aware of, both for foreign students who are 3rd and 4th year and Estonians. It gives you an additional 900 euros after tax, because that is tax. However, for the changes as of 2022, we're not quite sure whether you'll be allowed, seeing that you will already be an employee as a research assistant. But currently you can be a PhD student and a research assistant, topping up your stipend.
Excellent, thank you. So our next question, I'm currently a bioengineering master's student in Tartu and already have a topic proposed to me by my supervisors. Do I ask them to pursue a PhD in this topic, or do I propose one that is entirely different, or ask other lecturers to supervise me? Since this is about biotechnology, Arun, do you mind taking this one?
Yeah, just a second. Yeah, actually, if you are really interested in the same project, or if you want to make some minor changes, you can always discuss with your supervisors. That would be the good idea.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, do PhD students have their workplace, offices, facilities, or something similar? So maybe each of you could talk about where you work specifically, whether you have an office or a workplace, a lab.
Maybe I can start with this. Right now I'm in my workplace. Can you see me? So,
Yes.
so this is my workplace, and I'm given with all the facilities that I need. Can see those monitors. So maybe I can take this. I can give you a tour if you want. So this is my workplace, and you can get whatever you want. Yeah.
All right. Joseph, tell us a little bit about where you work.
So for us in the Institute, you are actually placed based on your research center. So where I am is the Institute of Education. So this is my actual workspace. There's another PhD student here from Mexico who shares the space with me, and there are 2 others who are in a separate room. Primarily, we try to keep you close to your supervisors or in the same room as your supervisors, but you're assigned a workspace. We have equipment. We can use the university printer. We're given a quota as PhD students. So you can use it up to a certain amount. Then after that, once your page limit is out, then you have to more or less pay for that. But overall, we do have stuff. If in my case where I need specific software, etc., it's also done where I pay upfront, and then once it's active, then the institute actually reimburses me. So I do have full cooperation in that sense.
Milda?
Yeah, so I'm currently in University of Latvia in Livonian Institute because I work here as a researcher, but I actually have a workplace and a desk also in University of Tartu. Technically, I would have to share it with another PhD student. It depends. I mean, in our institute, you do get a desk, but some of us have to share it with other people, but it has not caused any problems in the past. So, and we also get security code, so we could work past institute working hours. So, for example, if the building is open until 8, some of us can spend there almost like the whole night if we wanted to. So, and you can get other supplies that you want. You just need to request for them. So I did not request for much because I already had most of the things that I needed from my master's because I just bought them. But yeah, you can get basically everything that you need for your research and any kind of, I don't know, tech, like appliances, I don't know, a computer or something. You can get those things, definitely.
Great. Louis?
Yeah, Johann Schutte Institute has a very nice large room for doctoral students, and then some doctoral students who are involved heavily in teaching are in another office downstairs. Like myself, I was there in the doctoral students room, which has plenty of space, a couch, a refrigerator, and it's nice to socialize. I've had several days going back to the memes that Milda introduced to us. Those turned into real life conversations, but it's a nice way to be around people who are going through the same thing. We also have printing and a printer. We have access to a printer, and we have access to a coffee room where we can get integrated with the actual faculty, and it's really a great way to get to know them. I myself moved downstairs, and I share an office with one person, so I'm on the third floor, but I would say we have a nice facility up on the Lossi building for those of you familiar with the layout of Tartu.
All right, thank you. So the next question, Joseph, since you're in your third year, maybe you can answer this, but what do you think is the main reason that it takes people longer than 4 years to complete a PhD?
Okay, so it's from the Institute of Education, my experience here, from what I understand, is some have been successful in collecting the data. The problem is with publishing. And I'll share with you an example with myself, where when you're doing a research that's considered to be interdisciplinary, you might target one journal and they might say, for example, it's too technical and not educational. You switch to another journal and thinking you have made it now more educational, and they say it's too technical. So you have those who have spent 4 years, they've collected the data, and because it's article-based, if you haven't published or submitted that it's accepted to the panel, then you can't go forward as you would do with a monograph to actually write and publish. So some have taken 4, 5, or 6 years. Most foreigners, however, that I've met seem to be completing within 4 to 5 years. Within 4 years, they've more or less completed, and they spend the 4th to 5th year writing up and going through pre-defense and defense. So that's one. Another thing that I've noted also here at the Institute is for some Estonians, they are family driven. So once they have completed the bulk of the work, 3rd to 4th year, they then refocus on the years missing. And so by refocusing on their families, that kind of pull away from the amount of attention they've put into the academic work. But so far for my institute, I can say most seem to finish within 6 years on average, both foreigners and Estonians.
Great, thank you. The next question has to do with working alongside doing a PhD. Have any of you seen somebody working a full-time job and be successful with managing the PhD? Milda?
I am working a full-time job, but there's a huge catch. My work coincides a lot with my PhD, so if you can find a job that you can kind of, that many things overlap, then yes, but if you had another job, like a completely different job, then no way. Not possible, not going to happen. Even if you have a completely free schedule, a freelancer or something, not going to happen. If you can manage, but it has to be research that is related to your PhD, and so you could combine them. That's the only way, at least what I imagine.
Great, thank you. for your insight. How are the articles weighted toward the curriculum requirements? For example, what kind of course load do you have to take alongside your articles? Louis?
Yes. Okay. I have to say that I can only speak from my institute. I would imagine that it's fairly similar for other faculties, but that there is minor variance. For us, there's several components. If you do an articles-based dissertation, I should say that it's not just having 3 articles and then boom, you're done. You do what you get really critiqued and evaluated on is your ability to present them nicely and concretely in a binding text, because that puts theoretical and methodological synthesis into everything. So you can't just cherry pick all over and then pass it off as a dissertation. No, there has to be something that relates. But in addition to that, and I actually like this a lot about my institute, is it's not just dissertation and you're done. Joseph pointed out that one of the advantages of doing article-based is that you have already been evaluated by your peers who you may or may not know, who are outside of your faculty, university, and in most cases country. Whereas in the monograph, you could be working on that for years and then have a finished product. And then how many people read that eventually before you turn it into a book for a postdoc? So what I really like about my institute, the Johann Schutte Institute, is that they want to make sure that you teach, that you supervise, that you pass 2 comprehensive exams. So, and a lot of US universities or Canadian universities, if you do, let's say, IR or comparative politics, that's not your comprehensive exam. It's really related to your more concrete, very narrow topic, and you will agree on a reading list with your supervisor. But the way that my institute does it is you have to pass 2. Because they really want to make sure that there's political theory, international relations, comparative politics, and Baltic Sea region politics. They want to make sure that graduates of our program are prepared to know the discipline as well as, and not just being very narrow in their focus. You have to present at one conference. That's a must, and I think that that should be a must in all departments, because publicly presenting your research is a very valuable personal skill, but especially as the deeper we go or the further we go into the 21st century, shrinking jobs, especially now with the COVID pandemic, being able to sell yourself and almost brand yourself as an academic is very important to enter the job market. And the final component is the smallest one, but we do have to take, I think it's around 30 ECTS. I don't remember specifically because that was all knocked out in the first 3 semesters of my study. So.
Yeah, thank you. From what you've seen of people that have graduated around you, what do you think the chances are of getting a job after the completion of your PhD studies, specifically in Estonia? Arun, do you have any experience with this?
So in my circle, like after completing PhDs, most of the people, they go for a postdoc. So they don't look for this job opportunities. They don't look for this permanent residence. They actually shift to the different countries or even in the Estonia for postdoc. So that's how it works in my institute.
All right, thank you. Milda, we have a question from Facebook. Would you say that pursuing a PhD is somewhat pointless if academia is not where one wants to base their career later on?
That is a very good question. I sort of implied that in my presentation, but now that I think about it, for example, in technologies or something like that, in physics, if you probably not at all. Like research like that is very important in producing, I don't know, new better computers, for example, or it depends on the field, obviously. But when it comes to humanities, it is very difficult for me to imagine why would one want to be, for example, a linguist if they wouldn't be an academic. I really don't see a reason. I mean, unless you want it for yourself, sure, if that's a personal wish. But for example, if in terms of labor market, I would think that it's even worse to have a PhD than masters. For example, if you want to find a job in humanities, let's say, but in a different area, not in academia, I really don't see a reason to do so. But obviously in other fields, especially what is generally called sciences, the real sciences, the hard sciences, then it's a completely different situation. Obviously, if you know, in there, the research is much more practical, so to speak, so it can be applied. So in their PhD would be definitely useful, just because you have this, you get the skills to do that job. So for example, if you want to produce medicine, so that would definitely be a meaningful thing. But in humanities, I'd say that you would have to be very specific in your work choice in the future. And it is difficult for me to imagine something that is not academia. I cannot think of anything right now, in humanities at least. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I just cannot think of anything.
Okay, thank you. Joseph, the next one is related to the relationship between practical work and academic research. How much of this process have you found can be done as practical experimentation?
Okay, specifically for me, I can share my journey where to do my research experiments, I go to the Tartu Healthcare College. So it's for us in the Institute of Education, a lot of our experiments and data are linked either to Estonian institutions. There is a friend of mine who is a fourth-year PhD student. He goes home to Ghana to collect data. Or my Estonian colleagues, they will go to their respective schools where some of them still work as high school gymnasium teachers, or in the basic level, which we would call junior high, between primary and grade 9. So most of the work is related to what we're doing as professionals. However, for those who are doing topics such as policies, I realized that some of them, their work is only practical at the government level. So while they will collect data, etc., and they'll share with us, it's specific for Estonia. These are unique Estonian projects where they're looking at changing policies and so on. And you do have primarily Estonian students who will do those projects, work related to the Ministry of Education or Science and Technology, areas of the Estonian society. So for us, it's primarily related to work or applied to education as a whole.
Great, thank you.
Oh, Joe, I'd just like to add on the question about whether we should do a PhD. Is it practical outside of academia? There are two different parallel worlds that's operating. You have Europe and Estonia, where PhD primarily drives those who are in academia. And then you have the Anglo-American world, especially the former British colonies, where your PhD determines your salary. So in Jamaica, for example, a lot of principals or directors of school have PhDs in education. Why? Because that's the only way you get a salary that would be at the top range. So our salary is linked to qualification. In banks, you have people who have PhDs in econ, even though a lot of time we debate as to why do you need it? But then because our salaries are tied to qualification, where I've observed here in Estonia, for example, you can be the top guy in a startup with even just high school qualification based on your experience and ability to demonstrate the work. So I think we have, as they describe it here at the Institute, we have professionalized in the West PhDs that's within the North American context, and then it's exported within our region, in comparison to Europe, which still holds it in the classical domain, which is you need it if you plan to further yourself and further your discipline or the domain in which you're working. So for those of us coming from outside, even if the idea is, okay, I won't go back home and use the PhD, I see myself maybe as a World Bank consultant in economics, and the PhD will get me through that door. So I realize that there's two different worldviews where in Europe, it's still predominantly, what are you going to do further for your field? While for us, it's, okay, this will now open new doors in terms of my professional mobility.
All right, thank you. So we have a question from somebody that's currently in Tartu. What your personal opinion would be on contacting a supervisor personally rather than communicating with them only via emails. Arun?
So if you are new to him, then I would suggest it would be the good idea to go with the email, because if you just go directly and meet personally in the first place, it won't be a nice startup. So first email him email him first. That would be a good idea.
Thank you. So we have a question. After getting my master's done, can I work just as a research assistant without getting a PhD, or is it necessary to do the PhD? Louis, maybe you can take this one.
Well, I mean, in principle, it's necessary to be a PhD. I mean, I would like to know a little bit more about a research assistant. I mean, I have seen cases where MA students are involved with research projects, especially ones who have proven professional excellence and really an exceptional track record. But in principle, in most cases, you need to be in a PhD program, not hold a PhD, be in a PhD program.
Great, thank you. So due to the current situation, master's classes right now are completely online. How have things changed for PhD students as far as their balance for on-campus versus off-campus? Arun?
So right now, most of my coursework it's going online, and my research work, I need to be in lab. So yeah.
Milda, you're from quite near the area and have spent a lot of time in the Baltics. They've heard that it's quite cold in terms of climate. How many people how do people manage to work and entertain themselves during the snowfall?
Was it?
Yes, for you.
Right. Well, there are many ways, but actually, well, what Estonians do is sauna. It's not cold in there, you know. But no, entertainment is not really a big issue. I personally was born in the Baltic states, so the climate is not really a big shock for me. I got what I expected, but snow is fun also. And this year we had a very nice winter, so skiing was available and ice skating and all kinds of stuff, which is becoming exotic even in here. So I would say that, and especially during COVID, it's very fortunate because you kind of have to self-isolate, but outside you can do all these fun activities. And in sauna above 70 degrees, I think it's also not very dangerous to get COVID, right? So that's also nice. There are many ways. And Estonians actually have the tendency to have all kinds of weird ways to do things, not as crazy as Finns, but kind of. They also make up weird competitions and weird events, which would not be expected in other places. And Estonians really like to do all club work. Like, I mean, they like to have different clubs for different activities, and they really like to entertain themselves through activity, through working towards a common goal. So if you want to find yourself a social life in Tartu, I strongly suggest you join some kind of an activity club. Whatever your hobby might be, dancing, knitting, painting, or whatever, sports. If you join that club, you can actually acquire some friends, although it is a little challenging, to be honest. Most of my friends, especially initially in Tartu, were foreigners. That's definitely a challenging thing to do. But it happens. You just have to persist.
All right, great, thank you.
If I could add to that, Joseph, really quickly, because I noticed I can really link this with the question that's coming from Facebook about if you would have liked to study somewhere else. So whoever asked that on Facebook, I'll address this question as well. I'm never bored in Tartu, and I came from the DC area of the States, but I lived in Toronto, Canada for 10 years, and those winters are harsh, they're long, and they're just really cold. So, I mean, coming to Tartu, we have cold winters that are very dark, but they weren't seemingly as brutal. And I don't know if that's just because it's not quite as bad or because I like living in Estonia better. So linking this to the other question, no, I didn't want to study anywhere else. I mean, I had some options in the Netherlands and in the UK, as well as here, and Tartu was without even thinking about it. Once they accepted me, I confirmed that day. Actually, it was the next day because of the time difference. And what Milda mentioned about sauna is absolutely true. I've become a complete sauna junkie. I have one in my flat, but also a lot of Estonians like to have sauna parties. So it's actually a good way to socialize with people. So you can sit around. If heat's not for you, you can still go and sit in the common room and have a couple of drinks and some snacks and talk to people, or you can just go in. 85 to 90 is how I like it. Yes, it's true. Finns tend to go a little bit more with the heat. I noticed that my faculty has a lot of social events as well. If there's any MA students listening, they could probably vouch for that, at least before COVID. But I find I'm never bored pre and post pandemic, because pre-pandemic, if you choose Tartu, you have not just Tallinn, which is about 2.5 hours away, but you have Riga, very close. You have Helsinki and Stockholm. Stockholm's an overnight cruise, but you can meet a lot of Estonians on the ship. I've been really fortunate. I do have foreign friends in Estonia, but I've made friends, not just acquaintances, with a lot of Estonian people as well outside of my work. I definitely second what Milda suggested, that join some kind of group. You know, we have a beach volleyball group in the summer. And there's tons of things like knitting. You can meet people skiing. I think it was Arun mentioned Otapa. I have a dear friend in Otapa, and that's a great place to go skiing. They even have some artificial snow for when the real snow melts, if you're into outdoor sports. And then I think Tartu is a really vibrant place. It's very small, so if you meet somebody, you can run into them again. So no, I wouldn't want to study anywhere else, and I'm very comfortable being here.
Great. So maybe you can, each of you can talk a little bit about your experience with the language as well, the Estonian language, and how that, have you touched that at all? Is it something you're actively pursuing? We'll start with Arun.
Sorry, regarding the language or?
Yeah, the Estonian language, and if you had anything additional to put in on the culture.
Like I haven't experienced or exposed much to the language, and yeah, since September I have been just working in my room, and most of the time I was spending in the lockdown, so I haven't much exposure to this culture and others.
Great. Joseph?
Okay, so I actually started Estonian language while I was in Jamaica. My problem as an academician, even though I'm in a PhD student role now, is how the language was originally taught. It's the hardest language more or less ever created, blah, 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 until I went to Helsinki to doctoral school, met some foreigners who are living there and found out that they learned Finnish in 1 year. So I've been doing my stuff with the language. In terms of the culture, I do find Estonians are quite a hard nut to crack. In our respective classes, etc., there seem to be two major subgroups: Russian-speaking Estonians, including the foreign students who are from former Soviet states who speak Russian, and those who speak Estonian. The Russian-speaking or the Slavics tend to be more friendly. So as a foreigner for the first time, you tend to gravitate towards them. However, with the Estonians, if you are patient enough to first break the ice and get to understand them, eventually, as Louis said, you do build good, strong friendships to the point where you're invited to summer cottages and sauna parties. So it takes the foreigner, especially those of us coming from very, what we call warm, huggy, loving type cultures, to realize Estonians are very Nordic. Even the Latvians, I've been there because I have friends there, they're a little on the warmer side, so to speak, in terms of culture. But once you're willing to break that ice, then you start making friends. And that friendship that I realize is very strong and very long lasting. Now, in terms of the language, because I speak Russian, I realize as much as you hear that English is the language or de facto within the major cities, once you go outside those major cities, especially like I used to do, just jump on the blue bus, it's free, and you get off at the terminus wherever it's going. You walk around for 2, 3 hours. I realized that if your Estonian is like me, like, hi, hello, can I get this? Outside of that, you can't use it. Russian does help more than English. A lot of the rural communities seem to have the more older population who, from my understanding, got trained during the Soviet era. And so some amount of Russian does help in terms of communication. But if you're in the young, hip vibe of the major cities, Tartu, Pärnu, and Tallinn, you're good with English initially. So you won't be shocked as if you're left in no man's land. But if you're the explorer type, then you have to also be prepared that in some communities, you might find it hard to communicate in English.
Thank you. Louis, did you have anything to add on the language aspect?
No, it's pretty much covered. The one thing I would say, this only really applies to native speakers with English. I find that I really have to. I mean, what Joseph said is right. I mean, it's the lingua franca, but yeah, outside everybody speaks it in Tartu and Tallinn in this access, which you can become a bit too comfortable with if you come to the environment. And rural Estonia and the Baltics in general are very beautiful. So to any newcomers, I would encourage you to go check out a lot of places like Muhu and Kihnu and Saaremaa. But about the language, I'm finally at almost about a B1, and the basic stuff I had. But I found I really had to actively try because some friends of mine are really helpful. It is a very difficult language, and once you get, for me, everybody's different with languages. Some people can just get them and pick them up. For me, I have to work at them. And so I found over the pandemic somebody who offers lessons online, which is conducive to my schedule anyway. So I can do it at Zoom, and I could do it in my office or my home office. And this person was really good at taking the time first in one-on-one lessons and then in group lessons to explain the complex case structure. And there's always an exception, but I find that if you kind of pass a certain threshold where it's not just tervisex aitate, but if you can really start to say a little bit about yourself, then it's easier to work with people when you have these conversations. Estonians really do appreciate it. And I find that some people, they want to use English because a lot of my friends would say, oh, you know, you're the only person that I can use English with. So I want to, you know, do that, which is fine. And if anybody's listening or watching, love you, it's totally cool. But, you know, I find it's something you have to actively work at. It's not a language where you can passively, at least for me, get. Joseph mentioned Finland, and I can tack onto that Hungary, the other Finno-Ugric language. I find that Finnish and Hungarian are speaking super fast. So when I go there, it really takes me to break down the words a long time. We do offer free classes at the university, which are good to kind of break the ice, but I would encourage anybody that really wants to learn the language, yes, take those classes, but also think about how you can apply it in day-to-day life and try to quickly move beyond what is a cell phone, what is a table, what is a car, to actively using colloquial. And I think that then you'll be golden.
Great. Milda, do you have anything on the language? Is it so hard as everyone says?
Well, I managed to learn it, so it's definitely not. Hungarian is much more difficult than Estonian, I can assure you. I've studied both. I didn't manage to study Hungarian. Estonian is a piece of cake compared to Hungarian or some other Finno-Ugric languages, to be honest. But it really depends on what is your native language. It has a very huge role. Obviously, for Finns, it's very easy to learn Estonian, but coming from an English-speaking country, this will be more difficult because English is not inflected language, so it doesn't have case forms. Like, what is an illative? You have no idea, right? And it's because you don't have these kind of forms in your language. But for people from whose native language has cases, even German is way better than English, for example. If you have at least some cases and more forms, just more inflected, it will be much easier. But the main thing is hard work, a lot of hard work. Nothing beats hard work, as everywhere. And my method personally is, after getting a little bit in the language, just watching animation movies in that target language. So in Estonian, for example, watch Shrek dubbed in Estonian like 100 times, try to hear every single word, try to find out what it means. And after that, you'll be able to hold a beer conversation, no problem. And this helps tremendously. For example, a lot of my colleagues, when I worked in a startup prior to PhD, they would like, oh, thank God, we're all Estonians here. We can speak Estonian, don't have to struggle with it. So I'm like, it's like, oh no, you speak Estonian, you're Estonian. You know, it's like they really accept you differently if you can understand them, because obviously they have specific jokes. Every language has specific jokes. Every culture has specific jokes, specific idioms, and all kinds of richness that cannot be translated to any other language, so, and any other culture. So it's really, if you're going to spend a lot of time in Estonia, or any country for that matter that is not your country, I strongly suggest you to learn that language, because that opens up the doors that you haven't even expected to exist. It's a great experience. It's just a lot of work, but it's very rewarding, really, honestly.
We have two questions related to the social sciences for Louis. One is there an entrance exam for PhD programs in the social sciences?
Well, for political science at Johann Schutte, entrance exam, no. There's an application and then you have an interview. But you don't have to take like the GRE or something like you would in the States, no.
Great. And the second one, Can you start teaching in your first year as a PhD?
Teaching assistant, yes. Teaching, no. I think that, I mean, that's reserved for mid to latter level PhD candidates. Teaching assistants, like helping out a professor with marking, is something that's fine. But in our institute, the first year consists of getting a lot of your credits where you're a student, and focusing on finishing your prospectus. And then after the first year, you kind of, let's say, move from being a student, even though you're still technically a PhD student, to really being accepted into the community because you've been able to pass the prospectus, which is basically like a roadmap with a really distinct plan for how you want to proceed for the ensuing 3 years. But I don't know of any students who have taught their own course in the first year at our institute, no.
Great, thank you. And we have one last question that I see. For the first part of the question about getting admitted, and about if you can get funding, that is best addressed to the PhD admissions. But how can someone go about finding a supervisor in their field? Like, what are some initial steps they can take? Joseph?
Okay, so in my specific case, what I did was when I had the problems with anatomy passes in Jamaica, I started reading articles looking at different teaching techniques, and that led me to Professor Margot Spedesty, who is the head of the Center for Educational Technology. Then I wrote to him and said, you know, I am a medical doctor and university lecturer. I'm having some issues. I'm citing your articles. I'm also doing research. Is it possible? And that led the conversation starting until he eventually admitted, based on the fact that he was very busy, he would not be able to be a supervisor. However, he would speak to his colleagues to see if he could find one. For other students that I know I've met both in the Institute of Education and in science and technology, it also has to do with you looking, as Arun said, if a project is advertised or the Institute has on its webpage a project that's related to your work, then you look for the list of professors and you write, and once they see there's external interest, they will actually communicate with you. And once you get the ball rolling, they'll start pressuring you. Okay, are you doing any literature review? What's the gap you're trying to address? This is a gap that they have identified. Do you think you could work with it? And so on. And once you get that dialogue going, the prospective student and the team here, they will eventually find you a supervisor. And in some cases, I've seen even one student has 4 supervisors, where all 4 were so interested with the interest of the prospective student that at the interview, they all decided they were willing to work with that student.
Great, thank you.
Joseph, somebody asked something in the chat and I was trying to type them back, and now the question has disappeared. But it was about the job market outside of academia. So whoever that was, sorry about that. I have no idea. I was typing a response and it vanished on me.
So was it with respect to outside of academia in Europe or in general?
This was a generalized question.
Okay, so
yeah.
I can share with what I know from jobs in the African countries, most Asian countries, Middle East, and the Americas. Most of them seem to be tied to higher qualification. I'm not quite sure, maybe someone in the humanities later on can find out why this trend eventually started. And so I've had friends who have had their, let's say, their PhD done in education, or as Matilda was saying, in the humanities, linguistics and so on, and they end up getting jobs as directors of schools in the Emirates or Bahrain. So I think there is, if you're not thinking of academia, there is the possibility to work within your field in terms of management. In terms of education also, you can use your PhD and go further in administration. There are some people who, I know Estonian system doesn't have it, but in the Anglo-American system, we have the registrar, chancellor. So there's this administrative hierarchy that runs the back end of the university outside of the president or the rector. So they can look at that also in R&D with pharmaceutical companies, with companies that does, for example, with my area, software design for medical equipment and teaching equipment, because we use a lot of simulators now in medicine. So that's a big area. So if they're not thinking of the classic research, they can also do R&D where they'll be more at home in sharing their ideas, but also gaining from it in terms of profitability. So there's both sides of the coin. For me, it's academia. I've always loved the idea of academia, doing research and training and visiting a hospital and seeing my graduates working, and you pat yourself on the shoulder that, oh, that doctor was part of a cohort X or Y. And then there are those who, my friends who like working at the Ministry of Health, where they more transition from a clinical career to one where they're doing a lot of administrative work. So it depends on the individual, I think.
Great. Louis, since you're typing an answer to that, did you have anything to add?
No, that was really well answered. I mean, the initial question was whether or not our work was applicable outside of academia, and when I was typing, I guess I misunderstood the question. Does our work have value? And I answered that yes, actually it does. I'm a very forward-thinking social scientist, and I think that the work that we do matters in society. Of course, it depends on the argument, the project, the topic, but in general, I think a lot of it can be applied. But I was in the middle of typing back an answer to the more specific question that the person posed in the chat, and R&D is a really good instance. A lot of people with a PhD in political science, for example, go into government and politics, although usually it's more common when they do an MA, they do it, but you can also get into the think tank world. Some people go to state departments or Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I know for the US, I want to stay in academia, that's my goal, but I know the US State Department, if you have a PhD, as I understand it, you can already enter at a higher paying position. So like what Joseph says, like that's in that world, it's linked to your salary.
Great, thank you. And then we just got one more question in. How do you think, Arun, how do you think that having published research papers would help someone apply for a PhD program? Do you think it would be beneficial if they have that?
Yeah. It's it will be really helpful during the application process. Say, for example, during the application, if two person applied and if you got published papers, the professors will prefer the person with published paper. Yeah, and and the next thing is next thing is interview. I guess that the published papers won't help you during the interview, but you need to perform well at that time. But initial stage, the papers will really helpful.
Great, thank you. I don't see any more questions. So if anyone does think of any further questions, just got one. So again, for admissions related questions, you can contact PhD admissions at ut.ee.
Oh, Joe.
Yes.
Building on Louis and Arun's last input about the work and articles. From my experience here at the Institute, there are cases where students have done an article, let's say it's Louis looking at maybe a model for, let's say, creating political balance, or in the case of Milda, looking at how can we resurrect Livonian, an old language that maybe it's not spoken and so on. And just by doing that article, what you have in our institute, in one case, a particular group of startup outside of Estonia were doing the research as to how to approach gaming for education. And they saw this article, linked it, contacted the institute and said, we would like to work with this person, thinking it's a professor, and they say, no, it's a student's work. And so I think the university has filed for a patent before releasing, let's say, the student and the professor to aid in consultancy. So publishing also has another spin-off where you might see it as, okay, this is my 15 ECTS, I have the credits, I can move on. And as Louis was saying earlier, it forms like the ladder. So this is my foundation, but someone external to the university or your field could see the work and say, I need this for business. So there's also the other flip side, which is your work moves on from just being part of academia to where it's now incorporated in a business plan model or in guiding, let's say, a game or something that you never thought it would be used for.
Great, thank you. And since there are no more questions, thank you to all the panelists, Joseph, Arun, Milda, and Louis, for taking some time out of your very busy schedules to help us answer questions and give us your insights and opinions. If you do think of some questions further on, you can contact the International Student Ambassadors on their Facebook page, or we also have our website, isa.ut.ee, where you can find our contact information. And we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. For PhD admissions related questions regarding policies and procedures, you can send your emails to phdadmissions@ut.ee. Thank you everyone for joining us, and that's all we have.
Thank you for having us, Halaga.